Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Much better, much better. How's everybody today? My name is Chuck Fuscello. I'm the President and CEO of the Alzheimer's Foundation of America, and on behalf of our Board of Directors, our staff, and volunteers, thank you so much for being here today. But I'm going to wake you up right away. Does everybody have this in front of them?
Yes.
Turn it over. Here's the fun part. Who loves crossword puzzles early in the morning? There you go. I'm going to ask for 3 minutes on the screen. Who said, oh boy? See, I hear everything up here, just so you know.
She did.
She did. All right, I need 3 minutes, not 4. There we go. All right. I'm going to give all of you 3 minutes to get as many answers as you possibly can on the crossword puzzle. There's one catch. No cheating. Ready? Go. While you're doing that, I just want to announce too that we have some exhibitors of local resources here today, which I hope you take advantage of. Caregivers is in the back with senior helpers and Arden Courts. And one of our sponsors, we're so proud that they're here, AFA is here. They got a full team, probably 2 or 3 tables. So thanks so much for being here. You've been tremendous sponsors and supporters of us on a national level. We're very grateful for the support of AFA. 2 minutes. Minute 30. One minute. Forty seconds. 25 seconds. $15. Oh yes. 10. 5. 3. 1. Put your pens down. Come on, how much fun is that? Right, early in the morning, do a crossword puzzle. How many people, by a show of hands, this table to the right is having too much fun already, I can tell you right now. Maybe the table's going to be in trouble, I can tell right now. How many people, by a show of hands, got 15 answers? How many got 10? 5? How many got 1? How many got 0? Put your hands up high. You're going to see in a few minutes, a few seconds, why 0 is the correct answer. We're going to show you a quick film about this crossword puzzle.
name is Will Shorts. I'm crossword editor for the New York Times. This puzzle has a special story behind it. Only one person knows all the answers, but she doesn't remember them anymore.
Alzheimer's is a devastating disease. We wanted to demonstrate its effects and show how the AFA can help. So we took a common hobby and transformed it into a way of experiencing the disease. First, we learned facts about patients' lives by interviewing their relatives.
My grandmother is Catherine. She had forgotten to feed the dog. She found a doll, named it. My dad's name is Richard. My name is Doug. Dad completely burned the fried chicken.
Then, we had Will Shorts create puzzles based on each patient's life and the answers they can no longer find. We worked with the biggest newspapers in the United States to have the puzzles covertly published, making enthusiasts struggle to find the simplest answers. In addition to the newspapers, a range of media drove people online, where they could learn more about how the AFA can provide support. We showed the effects of Alzheimer's through a crossword puzzle that not a single person can solve. We reached over 5 million newspaper readers, a total of 50 million adding other media. AFA saw a 159% increase in web traffic and another 62% in calls. And with unsolvable crossword puzzles, we helped many find the answers they needed.
Better that you got no answers? So a while back I was approached by a healthcare public relations firm called Area 23 in New York City. And they contacted me and said, we want to do something to give back. We have a very successful business and our social responsibility entitles us to give back because of the success of our company. So I met with them, with our team, and we came up with this initiative. They interviewed 3 individuals, 3 families of loved ones who are living with Alzheimer's disease to get to know about their lives. So unless you know the individuals, you really can't solve the answers to the crossword puzzle. So the whole goal of this and the whole goal of them, can you imagine waking up on a Sunday morning and this is on in the New York Times and you think it's the crossword puzzle but you can't solve it? But for a brief moment you experience frustration, a little agitation and confusion. And it gives you a little walk in somebody's shoes who's living with dementia. And that was the whole intent of this exercise. So I thank all of you for doing it. I'm going to show you a quick little video titled Uncle Sam about the work of AFA.
My last 8 years in the city, and for my brother's last 11 years in the city, we took Sam out to lunch once a month. We had a routine. We'd meet him at the diner around the corner from his apartment. And the first time it was really dawned on us that there was an issue is when he didn't show up. We were scared, we were running around, and then we finally went and saw him in his apartment. He just forgot about it. And from then it was kind of like progressively a downward spiral. And then when we knew it was a major issue was when he was cooking and forgot to turn his stove off. And at that point it was, you know, we have a real issue here, and we need to start looking for resources to help us navigate through this and figure out a solution for it. Sam was a young boy when the Holocaust broke out. He was living in Poland with his family. He was brought to 3 or 4 different death camps and was able to survive all of them.
Concentration camps, ghettos, liberated by the American forces.
He's lived an unbelievable life. He's an inspiration to me every time I see him. It's really troubling when you're watching someone who's losing their mental capabilities, and they're losing their memories, and they're losing who they are as a person. It strips everything that you built an entire life for and everything you became, and it turns you into someone that you're not. It's a debilitating disease that it's going to affect you, and it's going to change the person that you are, both mentally and physically. And it also has a great effect on your family members, because it's very difficult to watch someone that you love go through such a tough time. He's probably written his life story 35 times. I think it's because he doesn't want people to forget what he's been through. And it's just so ironic that as this disease has taken over his life, he's starting to forget his own memories. And so here it starts, and it's talking about him and his life, and then we're a third of the way through the book, and he starts over. And so he writes his name, that he was born on December 1st, 1922, and then it goes through his whole story once again. He told me he was scared. He knew he was starting to lose it, and his memory was starting to go. He was vocal to me and said, I need help. And I need to get out of my apartment, and I can't live by myself anymore. Dancing it's his pleasure. Dancing to music is what it makes him happy, it makes him tick. He used to be very active. He was always going to the senior centers in the city. He was around people, he was dancing, he was happy, he was loving life. So where Sam is now, he can't dance anymore. He hasn't been dancing for the last year. And the hope is when he moves into the facility, he'll be able to start dancing again. Having a network of people to tap into, the Alzheimer's Foundation, they introduced me to a group of nurses that have been able to take care of my uncle. For a man that's been able to, beat almost everything else, to know that this is one he ultimately isn't going to be able to beat, it's tough. But there's hope. There's hope for him to find a cure. There's hope to make the rest of his days on Earth better. What I think will make his life more enjoyable is getting into an assisted living facility where they have the tools and resources to help people in his situation. No matter what hand you're dealt, it's really your attitude and the way that you go through life that's gonna, ultimately decide the way that you live your life. And as long as we keep on fighting, there's hope.
So we lost Sam recently, but the last 4 years of his life, his quality of life was greatly enhanced. His first year at a member organization of AFA and assisted living, Sam put on the freshman 15 pounds. He had a girlfriend. I had gone to see him a couple times, but the first time I went to see him, I didn't even recognize him. Well kept, clean shaven, his hair was a little long. He was in a physical activity therapy program, doing extremely well. He was doing so well as time went on that one day he was eating lunch, and he saw that the woman across from him wasn't eating. Put down his own fork, went around to the table, sat next to him, and started feeding her lunch. So it was a great journey for him, extraordinary individual. His great nephew, Jared Finkelstein, had come to us and explained to us that, as you saw in the video, that every Saturday my brother and I meet our uncle, and this one Saturday he didn't show up, so he came to us for help. And Sam's life story is truly extraordinary. Survived multiple death camps, was rescued, sent to Israel, lived in a kibbutz, and didn't know that he had any family or relatives. And he found out that he did have relatives in the United States and came here and lived a very healthy life. And I have to tell you that myself and the staff at AFA, our lives are enriched because we got to meet Sam, truly extraordinary individual. So thanks so much for taking the time to look at that, because it's very important to us. A little bit about the foundation. So our mission is to provide guidance, counseling, and support. We were founded back in 2002, and really because our founder, who was a caregiver, wanted to ensure that nobody goes on this journey alone. There's a whole description of his life here, but his name is Mr. Bert Brodsky. And back in the 80s and 90s, he was caring for his mom, and he noticed a change in her behavior and his father's behavior as well. I think what was the tipping point was his mom said to him one day, "Bert, don't worry, I took care of Dad. I took him to the doctor. And I saved you money. It only cost me $1 or $2 for the co-payment." And he's like, "There's something wrong here." You know, he's been involved in healthcare technology and the healthcare business all his life, and he knew he wasn't, that $1 co-payment just wasn't cutting it. So he found out that his mother took him in Florida to a pediatric clinic. And he knew something was wrong, so he had asked his mom and dad, he said, "I'd like to put a healthcare worker in your house and take care of you and make sure that everything's okay, that the medication you and Dad are on, you're taking." His mother refused to do it. He took a very drastic step. He sued his parents, walked into a courtroom down in Florida, and he says, "You know, you could really feel the emotional drain it was on me and my parents." He goes, "I walk into a courtroom, I'm on one side of the court, and they're on the other side of the court with my brother. So my relatives wouldn't talk to me, knowing that I would sue my parents, but all I wanted to do was ensure their well-being." So the judge read the case and said, Brodsky versus Brodsky, looked at Bert and said, "So how much money is involved?" And he said, "Your Honor, there's no money involved." And he reminded him, he says, "Mr. Brodsky, you're in Florida. Whenever I see two names of the family, there's money involved." He says, "Your Honor, all I want to do," and he explained the story to him. Judge looked at his mother and said, "Mrs. Brodsky, don't let a court make a decision like that. This is what your son wants to do." She accepted it. He had a healthcare worker. But as time went on, he noticed her behavior changing quite often. So he brought both his parents back to New York. And that was in the early 80s. No place to turn to. Nobody talked about Alzheimer's disease. The stigma back then was much larger than it is now. So he wanted to ensure that when his mom passed away, and he says things now that I said to him, "You know, I did so many things wrong." He said, "Well, you didn't know. You may think you've done things wrong, but at that time it may have been right." He says, "I walk out of the kitchen, go into the living room, I go back in, and she would yell at me and say, 'Where have you been?' He's like, 'Mom, I was just here. So I haven't seen you in days.'" He'd take his father out, tell her where he's going, come back, and she would yell at him. Obviously he didn't know how to handle it because he didn't know where to turn to. So when he founded AFA, and he's a very successful entrepreneur, very proud of his upbringing. He grew up in the Bronx with his mom and dad in an apartment and his grandmother and his brother. And he shared the cot and the kitchen floor with his brother. So as he grew on in business, he really took care of his family. Very successful businessman throughout this entire country. His priorities are his family, AFA, and then his businesses. But he founded AFA back in 2002 because he wanted to ensure that nobody like him goes on this journey alone, that there are places to turn to for guidance, counseling, and support. One of the questions I got asked today, do people really know that there are services? That's why we provide the tour. So from his thought to provide what was called a hotline at the time, of a couple of people on phones, we've turned into a national organization. And the impact, as you can see here, is quite clear. And the reason we're here today is because there's more than 180,000 people in your state alone that are living with this disease. Use a multiplier of 3 or 4 for the caregivers. You see how prevalent it is. By 2060, they're expecting, if nothing changes, if we don't find a cure and we don't find better treatment, it's going to more than triple. Think about that. Right now, there's about 5.8 million people throughout this entire country. So we have a national presence, more than 2,900 member offices nationwide. What's the significance of that? Our helpline that is staffed by licensed social workers that are dementia-specifically trained have the opportunity to refer to any place in this country, any state, any type of service that is necessary. So from that hotline, which is now a helpline, we have a national toll-free helpline, as you can see, a national memory screening, our partners in care dementia training, a youth leadership division, and I'm happy to say that we do a scholarship contest, 1,500 words or less to high school seniors that are going to college. We ask them the impact of Alzheimer's disease on them and their families and their community. More than 3,000 kids this year entered the contest. I'm happy to say we gave approximately $35,000 in scholarship, with the first prize being $5,000 to 34 individuals, all the way down to $500 honorable mention. We're very excited about that. We've trained more than 19,000 people in our dementia training program, and we screened more than 5 million people nationwide in our national memory screening program. So we are offering screenings today, right outside the door. When you register with Amanda. Question, who wants to get screened today? Thank you. You should. I did. Let me ask you another question, and we'll see who's honest. Who's afraid to get screened today? Okay, I'll ask it again. Who's afraid to get screened today? Okay, there's no reason. You know, like any other checkup, we go every year, hopefully for our primary care physician, and we get a checkup of certain things as a male and as a female. But one of the things that we try to encourage primary care physicians is a checkup from the neck up. You know, I remember going to my doctor last year, sitting in the waiting room, and there was an elderly woman there with her daughter, and they were talking, and her doctor came out. And the doctor looked at the daughter and said, "So how's mom doing?" So I saw him in the hallway afterwards, and now they know what I do. So they kind of turn away because they always know I'm going to ask them questions. I said, "Why didn't you ask him, your patient how she's doing?" He says, "Well, we've always done it this way." So I've done some education with them, and we provide education throughout the entire country. This is our helpline number. It's staffed by licensed social workers that are dementia-specifically trained 7 days a week. We handle thousands and thousands of calls on an annual basis. No volunteers, only AFA staff. So if somebody calls, they're going to get help, they're going to get the guidance, they're going to get the support. They're going to know that AFA will be with them on the journey, the entire journey, because how many caregivers do we have here today? You know all too often that once the disease walks in your front door, and who it affects, life is never the same. So you need the support services. Back in the 80s and 90s for Mr. Brodsky, it wasn't there. But it is here now, and we have some of our member officers and the exhibitors that are in the back of the room today. Take advantage of their services. Those are the local boots on the ground. Those are the local services that can provide the support that's necessary for all of you. Part of our mission is to give back to our more than 2,900 member offices. We provide 6 grant cycles to ensure that their services continue. And we also fund research all over the United States and as far as Israel, for better treatment and a cure. We never give up hope. We just funded 2 more projects this year. We want to ensure that part of what we do, the care, education, and research, is so critically important to finding a cure and finding better treatment. Our public policy division in Washington never stops bothering Congress. And for the first time, Congress finally appropriated more than $2 billion for research. And I'm hopeful that in 2020 that number goes over $3 billion. Sounds like a lot of money. But if you've seen the news, you've seen trials that have failed in the third stages that have spent nearly $1 billion. One company. So while $2 billion seems like a lot, as far as I'm concerned, it's not enough. And when you look at the cost of caring in this country, more than $250 billion a year, I believe it's about time the federal government steps up and declares Alzheimer's a national epidemic, funds the proper money for research and also for caregivers as well. And we'll never give a fight with our staff and our office down in Washington because we believe it's very critical. Next week on November 7th, we started an initiative a couple of years ago. We started with one building, the Empire State Building in New York City. We wanted it to light up in teal, which is the AFA Alzheimer's Awareness color. Today, more than 325 buildings throughout the world will light up in teal next week. What it does is it creates a greater awareness for this disease worldwide, and it allows a conversation, and then it allows people to seek help. Part of what we do today is educate you on Alzheimer's disease, support services as well, but it's so critically important that you understand that you can't go on this journey alone. Our tour has been going on for the last 3 years, and today we complete the 40th state in the last 3 years that we've been. Next year we'll complete all 50 states, and then in 2021 we just turn around because we feel it's critically important that you're educated and you know where to turn to for help. I mentioned AZI is here. Without the support of companies like that and other companies you see up here, these conferences wouldn't be possible. We don't charge anybody, as you know. We want to ensure that you get your services, and we're always grateful for our support. But we feel our work is never done. Our goal every single day when we walk in the office is to help more people today than we did yesterday. So give yourselves a round of applause for being here, and I thank you so much for being here. To get things started, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Peter Davies. Dr. Davies is the director of the Litwin-Zucker Center for Alzheimer's Disease and Memory Disorders at the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research. He's also a professor of pathology and neuroscience at Hofstra Northwell School of Medicine. And for more than 35 years, his research has been focused on biochemistry of Alzheimer's disease with a specific interest in and the development of new treatments and diagnostic testing for Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Davies is part of the Alzheimer's Foundation of America's Medical Advisory Board. We're always honored. He has a very tough schedule, and we're always honored and privileged that he's here today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Davies.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me okay. Yes. From my perspective as a long-time researcher on Alzheimer's disease, it's an amazing time in the field. There is such a lot going on that it's very hard for me to cover Alzheimer's disease in less than, let's say, a week of lectures. So to condense everything into about 40 minutes, so give you time for questions, is very difficult. So I'm really going to try and give you a New York Times view of Alzheimer's disease, talking about the background to some of the stuff you read in the press these days, but trying to give you some background of the science of Alzheimer's disease. It's a very exciting time, as I said. Every time I give a presentation like this, I go to the website clinicaltrials.gov, and if you go there, there's a little box where you type in your disease of interest, and it pulls up all of the clinical trials going on for that disease. So if you go on to clinicaltrials.gov and type in Alzheimer's, you come up with 2,122 clinical trials currently registered for with the FDA. So it's really an amazingly active time. It's almost impossible for us as experts in the field to keep up with all that's going on. It's very exciting because at the back of our minds is the thought that one of these might hit. One of these might actually work. And I have my fingers crossed for a couple in particular. We'll talk about that. The best way to stay informed about Alzheimer's disease and to respond to all the breakthroughs that you read in the press is to stay connected to groups like AFA. Because AFA has a very good scientific and medical advisory board who will provide accurate, honest information about what's going on. So don't believe everything you read on the front page of the newspaper. Rely on AFA and their website to tell you what's really happening. Some definitions to begin with. Dementia. I'm often asked what the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's is. Dementia is a generic term. It describes someone who has a decline in their cognitive functions, always involved in memory. And the decline is very important. I have a lousy memory. I will not go take Chuck's memory test because I probably, fail miserably. Because I've always had a bad memory. My staff have a bracelet that they gave me saying, I don't have Alzheimer's disease. I could never remember anything. So if there's a decline in function, we talk about dementia. And of course, dementia is very common. 16% of women aged over 70 and 11% of men. Really a lot of people suffering from dementia. And the major cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. The single most common cause of dementia in our elderly population is Alzheimer's disease. The second largest cause is vascular disease, small strokes, small or large strokes, excuse me. But there are a host of other conditions, maybe 60 different conditions that can cause dementia. So, if you see someone with a decline in cognitive function, it is not necessarily Alzheimer's disease. But Alzheimer's disease is the most common, and the numbers are frightening and staggering, and really why we have to do something about this epidemic over the next few years, because there's no way we can afford to care for 3 times our current number of patients. So the first requirement is a good diagnostic workup. As I said, there's 60 different causes of dementia. If you look at the patients who come to our center, a good number of them will come in and say, "Doc, my memory is terrible. I just don't remember names the way I used to. I don't, I go into a room, I forget why I went in there," and they're worried. They're scared that they might be developing something nasty. About a third of the time, we send them home and say, "Look, you're doing better than Peter is. You're okay." We test them, we go through all the testing, and they're worried because they don't feel as though they're as sharp as they used to be, but many of them are. In fact, many of them are much sharper than I am. So this is really an important thing to do. If there's a problem with dementia or you suspect a decline in cognitive function, get help. Get a good diagnostic workup. Blood chemistry is extremely important. Vitamin deficiencies, thyroid problems can cause dementia. In our elderly population, medications are frequently a problem. They're taking this pill from the cardiologist, that pill from the gastro guy, this one from the GP, and 4 over-the-counter supplements that, together are producing more confusion than they are helping. So this is a very important thing to look at. A brain scan is absolutely essential. We look for strokes or other brain abnormalities that might be causing the dementia. So this kind of workup really is essential. I will never accept a GP seeing a patient for 10 minutes and sending them home with a diagnosis of a little bit of Alzheimer's and a prescription for Aricept. That's absurd in this day and age, totally unacceptable. Family history is important, and I always am asked about genetics of this disease. Alzheimer's is very, very rarely a truly inherited disease. There are only about 1,000 families worldwide that really have true inherited Alzheimer's disease. One family we've worked with for a long time in the Philadelphia area, the disease begins between 38 and 42. The patient is dead around the age of 50. And this has gone on for 7 generations. They knew there was an inherited disease in the family before they knew it was Alzheimer's disease. So these families are extraordinary. They deserve, and now mostly get, special genetic counseling and special attention in research. But for 99.5% of patients, there really is no family, no clear inheritance. Now, it often looks that way. We have, fairly recently, a mother and daughter in the clinic at the same time, both with Alzheimer's disease. And I think this must be some kind of genetic case. We did a lot of research on that family, and we found that these are the only 2 members out of 137 members of that family that we tracked that had Alzheimer's disease. It's a fluke, in other words, but with a very common disease, you will see what look to be clusters in families. You know, it wouldn't be unusual to see 3 or 4 members of a family with Alzheimer's disease, simply because it's so common. But very, very rarely genetic. So, aside from the dementia, we've taken a lot of interest lately in what troubles families greatly, and that's the kind of associated symptoms that some Alzheimer patients experience: agitation, aggression, hallucinations. These occur in about 40% of patients, and they're very troublesome. You know, I can't tell you the number of times we've had patients say, "Who is this stupid woman bringing me to the clinic? She's such a aggressive, agitated Alzheimer patient who does not recognize his wife of 35 years." I mean, this is tragic to see and incredibly difficult to deal with. Come back to this because we're doing a lot of work in this area. Depression is also common. Depression is also common among patients with Alzheimer's disease, but it's not acceptable. I mean, there's no reason not to treat depression just because the patient has Alzheimer's disease. A depressed patient with Alzheimer's disease is much more difficult to deal with than a happy patient with Alzheimer's. So treatment of depression when it occurs in Alzheimer's disease is, you know, obligatory as far as we're concerned. The standard antidepressant therapy works fairly well. Insomnia and erratic sleep patterns in Alzheimer patients also a big problem that was neglected really terribly until the last few years. Now there's a great deal more interest. AFA is working with a couple of companies, I believe, to try to deal with, get the information out on how to deal more effectively with insomnia in Alzheimer's. Okay, it used to be that definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's required examination of brain tissue. And this was usually at autopsy, although a few younger patients in their 30s actually undergo a brain biopsy. So now it's possible, and it will become increasingly possible to make a definitive diagnosis of Alzheimer's through PET scan. And what the PET scan can detect now is what Alzheimer himself first saw back in 1906. The diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease relies on detecting plaques and tangles in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease. Two unusual but very characteristic lesions that occur, abnormalities that occur in the brains of patients with Alzheimer's disease. We'll look at these in more detail. I'll try to keep the biochemistry to a minimum, but we'll look at these in a little bit more detail because they are now the focus of much of the therapeutic efforts in this area. The plaques of Alzheimer's disease, made of a protein called beta amyloid, which deposits in the brain tissue around and between the cells, surrounded by a halo of degenerating nerve cell processes. So it's a big complex lesion, amyloid deposit with degenerating nerve cell terminals. You can see in the bottom panel the typical number of plaques that one would see in an ordinary average Alzheimer's case. The tangles of Alzheimer's disease, and this is a drawing made by Alois Alzheimer back in 1906, and they look just like this today. As we stain them with more modern methods, they're made of a protein called tau, which tangles up inside those cells. And again, here, the kind of typical number of tangles that we see in the brain of a patient with Alzheimer's disease. So lots of plaques, lots of tangles. This is what characterizes the brain of a patient with Alzheimer's disease. And these are then the targets for treatment. And it's a very kind of simplistic concept that here's an abnormal structure that shouldn't be there. So why don't we prevent it from occurring or get rid of it and hope that that improves the patient? And the amyloid of the plaques is the major target for therapeutics, even today. And this is kind of the amyloid cascade hypothesis, which has been around in this field for a long time now. But the idea is simply that amyloid deposition or formation of amyloid in brain triggers everything else. The tangle formation, the cell death, the dementia, everything results from amyloid formation. But it's not quite that simple. As we age, we pretty much all deposit amyloid in our brain. Here you can see a study of brains from people, this is actually in Australia, but starting at age 40, the percentage of people who are positive for amyloid goes up quite dramatically. So that by age 80, about 80% of people will have amyloid deposits in brain. And there's a kind of good news and bad news scenario here. If amyloid production and deposition in brain really leads to Alzheimer's disease, then as we live longer, we're pretty much all going to get it, right? It's reaching 80% at 80. If that causes Alzheimer's disease, which occurs much less frequently, but with a similar curve, maybe we're all going to get it if we live long enough. The good news scenario is there seems to be a lag between amyloid deposition in brain and the occurrence of Alzheimer's disease. So maybe if we block amyloid production or deposition, we can prevent Alzheimer's disease. That was the hope. This is what I was talking about earlier in terms of visualizing amyloid in living patients. We do this now routinely with a PET scan. Here's the kind of image you get from an Alzheimer patient where the yellows and reds indicate a lot of amyloid. And here's the control and what my brain looked like a year or so ago. Don't know about today, but I put my head in the scanner and I don't have amyloid in my brain. But this is the Alzheimer, this is the control. And this is enormously helpful in therapies because we can try to block amyloid production or try to clear amyloid, but we can follow this now in living patients to see if we're doing what we said. But it's important to remember that the demonstration that you have amyloid in your brain does not mean you have Alzheimer's disease. Because, as I said, a number of normal elderly people develop amyloid. So here's Alzheimer's disease again. Yellow, lots and lots of reds. This is a normal aging person. And this is another normal elderly person, essentially identical to this one, but they have a lot of amyloid. So the presence of amyloid in your brain does not mean you have Alzheimer's disease. Some people will try to sell you on the idea that it means you will get Alzheimer's disease. But the evidence for that is not very good. So amyloid scan by itself is not diagnostic. That's the point here. But if some version of the amyloid hypothesis is correct, then it should be possible now to reduce or prevent the occurrence of Alzheimer's disease. And there are two elements. This is the only biochemistry I'll really talk about. The two enzymes are required to produce amyloid in brain, gamma secretase and beta secretase, or base. A single large trial, it was a very large trial, of a gamma secretase inhibitor took place, and in fact, it ended up making people worse, not better. It did not succeed. In fact, people were somewhat worse. The first trials with beta secretase, base inhibitors that people have been running for a few years now, but the results have not been good. Merck had the largest trial going. They stopped in mild to moderate Alzheimer's disease. It was stopped after it became clear to the monitoring committee that there was no possibility of a positive result. It was futile. This was despite reductions in amyloid in blood and spinal fluid of up to 85%. The drug did what it was supposed to do. It blocked amyloid production. Trials in an even earlier group of Alzheimer's patients called prodromal, mild cognitive impairment, were also discontinued for futility. Reports at ESI also recently terminated a BACE inhibitor trial because it wasn't working. BACE inhibitors may also have had rather more negative effects than positive effects. Can't tell you how disappointing this is. My center at North Shore, when I worked, we were testing BACE inhibitors both with Merck and with ESI, and it's so disheartening to call our patients and say, the drug isn't working, we have to stop. We're crushed as much as the patients are. The other strategy which I want to come on to, because it's been in the press so much, is really largely based on work in mice. Mice can be bred, selectively and carefully bred, so that they develop a large number of amyloid deposits in their brain. This is a mouse who was about 15 months old, and all the brown blotches on this tissue are amyloid deposits. If I waited about another 6 months or so, you couldn't see the brain for amyloid. Now, the mouse doesn't seem to care very much. I mean, what does it do? It sits in its cage, it eats, it drinks, it breathes. There really isn't any impact on the life of the mouse as far as we can tell. But they're enormously valuable for testing therapies. You can test therapies in mice so fast to see if they remove amyloid, and this is exactly what was done by something called passive immunization. It's a clever idea to make an antibody to amyloid like you would make an antibody to an influenza virus, and give it to a patient or a mouse and say, can this antibody that binds to amyloid clear the amyloid away? I mean, it really was a kind of holy cow experiment in the mouse, because it was incredibly successful. It was not only incredibly successful, it was very easy to reproduce. You gave these antibodies to mice, you could completely prevent the amyloid forming. You could even remove some of the amyloid if it was already there. Very exciting result, and it was very quickly translated into human trials using antibodies to amyloid, monoclonal antibodies to amyloid, given to patients over an extended period of 18 months, usually, or 2 years. The first 3 of these listed here, this is where you need the PhD in biochemistry is to pronounce the names of these antibodies. Batanuzumab, solanezumab, and crenuzumab were the first three of these antibodies into the clinic, and they were failures. They completely failed. There's this one that made news just the last week or so. Aducanumab, Biogen had a press release just last week about aducanumab and the success of I'm at a total loss to understand this press release because in March, Biogen reported that when they analyzed data from 1,748 people who completed treatment with aducanumab, there was no positive result, and they halted the 2 trials they had running because of futility again. The monitoring committee said, look, there's no possibility of a positive result here, we'll stop. So we thought in March that aducanumab had joined the other 3 or more antibodies as a failure. But on October 22nd, Biogen reported that analysis from apparently 2,066 people, so just about 250 more people than the first analysis, and they said it was so successful that they're going to apply to the FDA for approval. Now, my phone ran off the hook. Patients asking me, can we get into the aducanumab trial? But there isn't an aducanumab trial because they terminated it for futility in March. So none of us have access to this antibody. Secondly, I haven't seen the real data here. All I have is the data that was in the press release on October 22nd. Apparently the results will be presented in December for us to have a look at. But right now, this really has us not knowing what to say. The trial was negative in March and it became positive in October. Really? But we'll see. I, for one, hope that my skepticism is misplaced. I want something to treat our patients that works, but I don't know yet whether this is it or not. So, we'll all have to wait and see. The more scientific point here is that all of these antibodies, aducanumab, batanuzumab, solanezumab, have been demonstrated to reduce amyloid in brain. So here you see repeat PET scans on 3 patients. This is a PET scan before they were treated with an antibody, and this is after 1 year of treatment, and this is after 2 years of treatment. And it's very obvious that there's a reduction in amyloid in all these patients. This treatment is working in the sense that it is doing what it's supposed to do. The problem is the patient doesn't know it's working. There is no impact on the disease in the patient at all, as far as we can see. So this is maybe the time to ask the question, is the amyloid hypothesis just wrong? Are we trying to treat the wrong part of the disease? Is amyloid that occurs in brain just a scar of the disease, not a driver of disease? So we don't know yet. There have been so many failures in the therapeutics of attacking amyloid that many people are now very negative about further studies in this area. But probably it may be premature from a scientific point of view but we're pursuing other areas for therapies. And one of those is trying to treat the tangles of Alzheimer's disease. And PET scanning for tangles, or for tau, the protein that makes up tangles, is now doing very well. Here you can see an Alzheimer's patient with amyloid and tau scans. And this is what the diagnosis of the future looks like. This is diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease by PET scanning, where if you're a healthy control, your brain looks nicely blue, and if you're an Alzheimer's patient, you have both amyloid and you have tangles and tau. So we can now, at least in theory, definitively demonstrate that a patient has or doesn't have tangles and plaques in brain. And this is, I think, only a matter of 3 or 4 years of validation of some of these techniques. 3 or 4 years away from being the way this diagnosis will be made. We have mice that have been engineered to develop tangles as well, specially bred. We don't do anything to the mice except breed them very selectively, but these mice develop tangles in their brain, and this again is a very important asset for rapidly testing anti-tangle therapies. And here is one of the first successful anti-tangle treatments in the mouse. Here in the black are untreated mice, and this is just a measure of the number of tangles in brain, and you can see that we very effectively suppress this number of tangles by treatment, again with monoclonal antibodies, new wave of therapy. This was published in 2011, and it's taken a little while, but these antibodies are now moving into human clinical trials. This one I point out as being a particularly interesting anti-tangle antibody because it was made by my lab. So if this works, if this cures Alzheimer's disease, I'll get very rich. If this cures Alzheimer's disease, I don't care about the money anymore. But this is, it's incredibly exciting, just on a kind of personal note, to take something you develop in the lab and test in mice, and it looks so good, and now to have this in clinical trials in humans, I kind of live with my fingers crossed, hoping that this is going to work. But there are other anti-tangle antibodies in clinical trials. Again, Biogen has one. AbbVie has one, which is actually we're testing in our center. These anti-tangle antibodies in animals, again, look very promising. We don't know whether they're going to work in humans yet. We don't have a single study that's reported the results yet, so they're all still in progress trials. But you will read about some of these probably by the spring. You'll start to hear about anti-tangle therapies and whether they are successful or not. Tangles, particularly in the frontal lobe of the brain, seem to be associated with psychosis. And this is what we've been getting very actively interested in, this psychosis, the agitation, aggression, hallucinations that are so troublesome, seem to be related to the presence of tangles, particularly in the frontal lobe. So and they are extremely difficult to treat. There's this old ad for Thorazine kind of illustrates the problem. Those are the kind of drugs that have been used to control agitation. Thorazine, Haldol, risperidone. These are major antipsychotic drugs that have been used to try to control the agitation. They're not good drugs to use in this population of patients. The drugs carry what's called a black box warning in the elderly, which means they increase the risk of death in the elderly population. So when these drugs are used, they have to be used with extreme care in the elderly population. We're trying, with the help of AFA, to improve the situation by looking at a mouse model of psychosis where we can direct tangle formation to the frontal cortex of the mouse. And we've done this by appropriate breathing. And we call them the danger mice because they are very aggressive. And it is dangerous to put your hand in the cage of that mouse if you don't know what you're doing, because they will bite you. They will bite you hard, and they will continually bite. But we can study these mice quite nicely in terms of their aggressive behavior, in terms of their agitation. They run around like crazy. I wanted to show you a video, but the animal care people won't let me show the video. A mouse just going round and round and round in its cage for 10 minutes at a time. They're really agitated and aggressive mice. But this is what we want, because we want to find a therapy that works. And we are running drug trials with novel new drugs that will be hopefully much safer than the antipsychotics, but will provide some relief of the agitations. And we're alert very much so to the side effects in the mice, but so far we haven't seen it. So what do we have now? And what's available now? The answer is not very much. The drugs that are approved by the FDA are here. Aricept, Exelon, Razodone, Memantine, or Namenda, now Nanzaret, which is a combination of Aricept and Memantine. Our attitude is that every patient should try. Should try Aricept, maybe Aricept with Namenda. In our experience, and this is just personal experience, about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 patients shows a response. They're brighter, more attentive, more alert. 4 out of 5 don't. But we try everybody. And if you don't see a response in, let's say, 3 months, stop. That's what we do. If we see a response, it often continues for a year or a year and a half, and then we've lost it. We've lost the response. So it's a temporary improvement, small improvement, in some patients, but not all. That's where we think. Clinical trials, ongoing right now. The ones you read about are monoclonal antibodies, still the monoclonal antibodies to amyloid, aducanumab, solanezumab. They will be, people are continuing to try these drugs, even though they haven't looked very promising. Monoclonal antibodies to tau are in patients now, and we hope to get some readouts next year on that. There's a good site if you want kind of some more in-depth and thoughtful information about these therapeutics. This site, owlsforum.org, has a little section on therapeutics which can be very helpful, very informative. I use it myself to try and keep track of what's going on. So, okay, the last 2 minutes. Is there anything we can do to reduce our risk of Alzheimer's? And the answer is yes, there is. Dance. And it seems like a trivial thing to say, but it really isn't. A few years paper on occurrence of dementia and association with leisure activities. And they found that the incidence of Alzheimer's disease was lowest in people who went dancing. And it was quite a big reduction in occurrence of Alzheimer's in people who went dancing a couple of times a week. And it really makes sense when you think about it. This is so effective on many levels. Physical exercise, you've got to hop around a little bit to dance. Social and mental stimulation is involved in dance almost by definition. And does the participation in such programs reduce the occurrence of dementia? Probably. We don't have solid scientific evidence, but those factors by themselves, exercise, socialization, engagement, are critically important. You saw Sam, how Sam came to life when those factors were put into his life, even though he was already in the course of the dementia. In general terms, it's really a no-brainer that healthy aging requires a good diet, exercise, and appropriate care of health. That's often not mentioned. You should, keep your cholesterol under control. I have to keep my cholesterol and my blood pressure under control. Regular checkups, very important. But engagement, I think, is the key. You're here, you're participating, you're involved. Get involved with AFA, do something to stop yourself sitting in front of the TV, which is probably the worst thing you could possibly do. So I would like to acknowledge the receipt of the research grant from AFA. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for Dr. Davies? Could you just wait for the microphone, Chris?
Now, you need to use the microphone because my hearing is very poor. I'm getting older too.
Dr. Davies, we're using two drugs. Is donepezil one of those drugs that you indicated there? Is that Aricept?
Aricept and Namenda or Memantine. It's called Memantine or Namenda.
We're using Memantine and
Aricept.
Aricept. Aricept. Okay, thank you.
I don't recommend these drugs specifically, but these are the FDA-approved drugs currently. We try them with everybody, but we have very low expectations.
Sir, I did not see any mention of Lewy bodies in your slides.
Right. Lewy body dementia is one of the 60 other conditions that can produce dementia. It's actually very hard to diagnose clinically, hard to separate from Alzheimer's, but the patients, I'll give you the characteristics that might make us suspicious that a patient has Lewy body dementia rather than Alzheimer's. That's a male, around 70 years old, having hallucinations and some psychotic symptoms, and having problems with gait, having problems walking, balance. That usually alerts us to the fact that this might be Lewy body dementia. Memory is usually a little better than in Alzheimer's, but it's a very tough distinction to make clinically. And about half the people who end up with a diagnosis of Lewy body dementia turn out in autopsy to have Alzheimer's disease. So it's a tough distinction, but when we look for, there are a number of other diseases that are very similar to that, but frontotemporal dementias can look like Alzheimer's.
Oh, I I would just like to know if it's hereditary.
Very rare. It's very rare for Alzheimer's to be purely inherited, but I didn't say, and I should have done that. Everything is in a sense hereditary, and your risk of getting flu is a product of three things. One is your genetics, how your particular genes are put together. Two is your lifestyle, and three is life events. So, from breast cancer to Alzheimer's to flu, your risk is dictated by those three things. Now, obviously, your lifestyle is the major one that you can control. So you can do something about your risk of Alzheimer's by modifying your lifestyle. No smoking. There's a question back home. So, yeah.
Doctor, you mentioned there were several clinical trials underway. How many are in late-stage clinical trials and any near FDA approval at this point?
I have very, very few late-stage trials. In fact, the trend has been in this area to try to go earlier and earlier and earlier, so that, with the rationale that the earlier you catch the patient, the less damage has been done, and the better chance you have of success. There are still, though, a number of trials going on in what's called mild to moderate Alzheimer's, and that's the category to look for, because some of the patients there would be, 4 years, or maybe 3 or 4 years into post-diagnosis. So that's considered a moderate case. I need you to have the microphone for that. Sorry, back.
Yes. Are there any suggestions, or is there anything that might help in reversing some of the cognitive decline that older people might experience?
I never use the word cure, and when I talk about what we do to try and develop treatments for Alzheimer's, what I've seen in animals and what I'm hoping to accomplish in people is to stop the disease, so to prevent the progression of the disease. Now, obviously, one would want to do that as early as is possible. The kind of the model that we talk about, and it's not entirely frivolous, the model that we talk about is that we want to hold people in Peter's stage, the kind of stage where I am, where I forget a lot of stuff, but I can function. Early in the disease, it's quite hard to tell somebody in my state from somebody who's going on to develop Alzheimer's, because we're both very forgetful. We both walk into rooms and say, now, why did I come in here? That's me, that's just me. But if we can hold patients, we can stop the disease at that point, I think we'd have accomplished a lot. I don't know that I would want to hold and stop the progression in a patient who'd already been institutionalized. That almost seems to me cruel, but I won't be the one making those decisions. We want to stop the disease as early as we can, and that's what we're shooting for.
How you doing, sir? My mother-in-law is 94. She has Alzheimer's, and a lot of times she's forgetting things. One time she got up and she didn't, and when she went back to bed, she didn't think that was her husband in bed. And she has a lot of daughters and grandkids, and I just want to know if, say she's missing her underwear in one drawer and she thinks someone stole it or something, can the daughters and the granddaughters just kind of like give her a break and just find it and give it to her instead of no mom, no mom, no mom. Instead of correcting her, can't they just go along with the program a little bit? Because it just gives her anxiety and she gets more screwed up than ever. Can they like, you know,
I think that kind of control or treatment, the way you can cover for the patient in that particular type of patient is very valuable. If she has daughters and granddaughters who can take care of her, she's very fortunate. But yeah, because often patients in their 90s, they're so frail for other reasons that we don't like to use drugs at all. You know, most clinical trials will cut off at 85 because it's too easy to do harm to a frail 90-year-old. And if she has the support, I think they're doing exactly the right thing.
all right, thank you.
My question is about mild cognitive impairment. So if you have that kind of dementia, when do you know it's gone to Alzheimer's? Which one of the tests or which one of the memory problems will let you know where you are in the process?
Mild cognitive impairment is this very loose term for that usually means that patients have a problem with memory and not much else, not many other problems. In other words, they don't get lost going to the supermarket. They know where they are, they know who you are, but they forget stuff. That is now, I hate the way that term is used as though it were a precursor to Alzheimer's, because often it's not. And then the formal studies that have been done, something like half of people with MCI will die with MCI. In other words, they won't ever get anything any worse than that. It's quite tough. You really have to follow people. And what we do is follow people every 6 months. We test them, but yes, you're happy, and memory's not that great, but come back in 6 months and we'll take a look. Often the memory's still not great 6 months later, but we've had one couple who've been coming to the centre for 7 years. Both have MCI and both accuse the other one of being worse, but neither one has progressed at all over 7 years.
Now, when you do that test, do you have a specific test or two tests that just give you the outline? So
We do a whole battery of neuropsychology. It
every
takes
6
about
months.
5 hours.
Okay.
Testing. We're very rigorous with our testing.
Thank you.
People are buying a lot of these gene testing kits where you spit it to
Yes.
the tube and you mail it out, and they look for alleged genetic markers, the APOE3 and 4 gene, and they tell you how many copies you have, and they essentially try to help you decide whether or not you might be prone to coming down with Alzheimer's. What is your opinion of these test kits and the impact that it has on people?
In terms of Alzheimer's disease, the only value of these gene tests is maybe to get people off their butts and modifying their lifestyle, changing to a more healthy lifestyle. If you look at the formal genetic testing, there's about 60 genes, gene abnormalities that might increase your risk for Alzheimer's disease. But you can have all these 60 gene variants and still never get the disease. With APOE4, we have a man who's 106 who carries the APOE4 risk allele. He's fine. He's sharper than I am. He'll tell you what time, what did the Dow Jones close at yesterday? He will tell you. How about the NASDAQ? He'll tell you what. This was yesterday. I have no idea. Vaguest clue. So in that sense, genetic testing in Alzheimer's disease is worthless at predicting your individual risk. So it's not going to tell you about your risk. It's going to say you have a risk, but you know, the risk of anyone, I can tell you, looking around the room, I can tell you what your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease is. It's about 1 in 6 by age 90. So when you live to be 90, 1 in 6 of these people will have Alzheimer's disease. Is that something you're going to worry about? That's regardless of your genetic profile, except for these very rare families which have very early onset disease, consistent occurrence of the disease at an early age, across generations. Their genetic testing and genetic counseling is required, not a home kit. So the 23andMe is not going to, if it tells you you have a risk of Alzheimer's disease of 1 in 6 by age 90, maybe you should get off your butt and do something. Exercise, do anything. I'm serious, changing lifestyle will reduce the risk of disease. I mean, we know that. And reduce the risk of heart disease, of stroke. So, let's do it.
What is the connection between anesthesia and the elderly? My mom was perfectly fine until she had a surgery, and she now has all the symptoms you've mentioned. And I've seen this in friends, parents, as well as with other family members. And I'm just wondering how that starts the progression.
It's a very controversial area. 6 years ago, almost 6 years ago, I went through a whole episode of surgery. I had over 24 hours of general anesthesia over the space of a couple of weeks. It was catastrophic, almost. The effect on my brain was really bad. I mean, my brain didn't come back to normal for maybe 18 months. Nobody really understands how that works, and why it works. Why some people, particularly elderly people after anesthesia, are delirious and become demented. Nobody knows really what the frequency of that is or why it happens. We have a research project in the center right now looking at this, which is based on my own experience. What the hell is going on here? I'm really scared for a little while, but I'm back to normal. As good as it gets.
Yes, last question.
I was surprised at how you stated that it's not inherited as much. My wife was just recently diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Her younger sister just recently passed from the disease. And she asks me every now and then, why me, why this, but as you stated, it's very rare.
Yeah, it's such a common disease, and you really need, if you have a family that lives long, they survive into their 80s routinely, you can see the occurrence of Alzheimer's disease in maybe 1 in 4, 1 in 5 of that family. So you'd expect to see a number of relatives with Alzheimer's in a family like that. In my family, there's no Alzheimer's disease because nobody lives long enough. I am the longest surviving male in the baby's line by a long way. And I'm only 71. So, you have to have the right family. Common disease, and it looks inherited, but it isn't. Okay.
Last one, I think. You mentioned earlier about the decrease of amyloid, but the patients don't know it.
Right.
Did they do anything to assess their depression, their sleep habits, or engaging them in in processes that would stimulate their cognitive skills to increase neuroplasticity, playing chess. What's your opinion on Norman Deutsch's theories?
And in the clinical trials, the information we have is fairly limited. So, you know, what we see in the publications are all the neuropsychology tests that they did before, during, and after, and the scores go down uniformly whether they were on drug or placebo or nothing. So we are very interested in this whole idea that one can stimulate people to improve cognition. We're running with the Bristol Assisted Living, we're running a dance program in one of the assisted living places which has largely a dementia population. We're also running in the same population strength training to see if that helps, and cognitive training to see if that helps. We don't know what the limits of those kind of interventions are, but I'm a big fan.
I guess I was wondering if the people who showed the decline after that 2 years of treatment, you said that they didn't know. I wondered if I was hoping if they did some new novel things, like tried to learn a new language or dance, that then they would know that they had made progress, if they could feel some subjective
Believe me,
difference.
if the drug companies could find something that's getting better or not going down as fast, they'd be all over it. But so far, I mean, it's this universal decline where you can't tell whether the patient is on drug or placebo. It's really heartbreaking to do these studies, to see such negative results. But we'll get there. We'll get there. That's the message.
Thank you, Dr. Davies.
Just join me in thanking Dr. Peter Davies once again. Thank you so much for being here. In front of you are evaluation forms. It's critically important for us to hear your thoughts and comments. If you could take a moment and fill them out. And at the end of the conference, you could just hand them in at the front desk. We are providing memory screenings here. If you go right outside these double doors here and go to the left. Bye, doctor. He's waving goodbye. See?
No, I don't want to manage.
Oh, you can get a screening. It's right outside. You could see Amanda. Just some housekeeping. We are streaming live on Facebook all throughout the world, and there's some comments. And a lot of people from Texas are watching us today. I want to thank Caroline Chavez for tuning in right now, and Barbara Thompson from Texas, and Lisa Doherty from Dallas, Texas, who just lost her dad. May he rest in peace. But there was a comment from a Cindy Stern. She wanted to know if there's a way to obtain a copy of the slides. To Cindy and everybody else here, if you email our office, it's just info, I-N-F-O, at alzfdn.org. You can obtain any of the PowerPoint presentations that are presented here today. To introduce our next speaker, please welcome Chris Schneider, who's the Director of Communications for the Alzheimer's Foundation of America.
Thank you, Chuck. We're really excited by our next speaker, Chief Gene Saunders. He is the founding president and CEO of Project Lifesaver International. So Project Lifesaver International is a longtime AFA member organization. They help work with law enforcement and public safety agencies to provide timely responses to save lives and reduce potential injuries of people who wander due to Alzheimer's disease or other cognitive conditions. Chief Saunders is a public safety expert. He is a decorated law enforcement officer. He's a retired police captain who founded the Chesapeake Police Department SWAT team. When he commanded that unit for 23 years. He has pioneered search and rescue techniques for individuals who go missing due to cognitive impairments. And he founded Project Lifesaver in 1999. So I think for every caregiver, their number one priority is protecting the safety of their loved one and making sure they're as safe as possible. There are steps that caregivers can take in the home setting to help improve safety and make things as safe as possible. So Chief Saunders is going to come up and he's going to talk a little bit about steps that we can all take at home to protect our loved ones. Please join me in welcoming Chief Gene Saunders.
Can you all hear me? Okay, good. All right, good morning. Good morning. First off, thank you. A little toy for you to play with when I'm trying to talk to you. First off, we'll set a couple of ground rules, so to speak. You probably will notice, if you haven't already, I am not from New Jersey. So you'll have to excuse during my talk any of the y'alls or the reckons that you may hear. I am truly a good old Southern boy from the state of Virginia. So, there you go. All right, second, if you haven't noticed, I am not up there. I am down here. Why am I down here? Well, many, many years ago, I noticed that if I was sitting out there with you and somebody was up here, I tended to lose attention quicker when they were up there and I was here. In fact, I learned a long time ago that the average person in a 1 hour time limit will give you 10 minutes of their attention. So what I try to do is boost that up, because you never know where I'm going to end up on this floor. Or if I am going to ask you some impertinent question like, what did you think of what I just said? So you're going to have to pay a little bit of attention. And thirdly, I am not going to talk to you or lecture you. I am going to remind you. That's what I'm here for today. Safety. We hear safety all the time, do we not? We hear it on TV, we hear it in talks. How many times have you heard it in a conference like this? Safety for an Alzheimer's patient, or someone I told you I was going to walk around. Or safety for a person with a cognitive disorder. Let me ask you another question. How often do you think about safety in your own home? Seriously now, don't lie. Because if we all thought that we concentrated so much on safety, what I want you to do is pay attention to how people drive on your way home. That is a real indicator of how safe we are. Now, I am in the same boat as many of you. I am a caregiver with my wife to my mother-in-law who has Parkinson's. Many people do not realize, you see how I can keep attention because they have to turn around to see where I am. Many people don't realize that Parkinson's does have dementia. It has hallucinations. So I am in the same boat that many of you are. And maybe that's the wrong vernacular to use, saying a boat. I'm in the same situation that many of you all are. So I do think about safety in the home. Why? Why is it really paramount to me now? Because my mother-in-law has a crushed right shoulder due to falls. She cannot use her right arm now. So, now, when we talk about safety, now let's see if I can figure out how to use this clicker. Whoop. All right, we're going to keep trying. By the way, y'all have all of this right in front of you. If you think that I'm going to go over, thank you. If y'all think that I am going to go over every one of these individually, you're in the wrong room. We will talk about them in a general term. We will point out a couple, but you can read. And I do want some feedback. I'm not up here just to regurgitate to you. I want to hear some feedback from you. Think prevention. All right, I saw a couple of hands up here when they said, yeah, I've walked around my home and looked at, and I think prevention. But there were a lot of people that the hands did not go up. You're not even thinking about prevention for yourself, if you're a caregiver for somebody in the home that has a cognitive disorder, their risk is far more or even greater than yours. And many of us adopt the attitude, well, I will handle it when it arrives. Well, do we not? I see head shaking. I know I'm guilty of it, or was. Adapt the environment. We're going to talk about some things you can do to adapt the environment. Minimize the danger. Well, that's exactly what we're trying to do when we talk safety. Okay? Now, here's some questions you can ask yourself. Now, when it says Alzheimer's up here, there are many, many other cognitive disorders that you probably know about that mimic Alzheimer's. Remember what the doctor said earlier? Dementia? Now, when I teach law enforcement, I tell them dementia is an umbrella term. Because all these others fit under it, like Alzheimer's and Pick's disease and Lewy body and cardiovascular dementia, and all these others that fit under that dementia umbrella. So I'm not going to refer just to Alzheimer's, I'm just going to call it dementia or cognitive disorders. All right, we on the same page? Good. Do they become confused or unpredictable under stress? Sure. Recognize a dangerous situation. If they, we ask them to recognize a dangerous situation, how many of us recognize a dangerous situation? How many of us put ourselves in dangerous situations knowing they're dangerous? If you sit there and tell me you've never done it, I'm going to have to call you a liar. We've all done it. We've all done it. Why? Because we're human. Know how to use a telephone in an emergency. Well, I'm going to fall back on some of the stories with my mother-in-law, and you may recognize them. When we first started picking up that my mother-in-law had a problem, she was living in independent living. Every 2 or 3 days, I had to go to her house and reprogram the TV because she couldn't handle the remote. Then we noticed that she wasn't answering the phone. Why? Because she said she didn't feel like it. Well, the truth was she had forgotten how to use it. Now, when did this really come home to me? When I picked up the cable bill and saw that she had subscribed to 3 porno channels. And I had to call them and explain about my mother-in-law and the porno channels. Fortunately, they said, okay, we understand. So, can they use a telephone in an emergency? Probably not. Do they know how to get help? Well, most of them don't even know they're in trouble. And I'll expand on that a little bit more later. Stay content within the home. I'll also talk about that a little bit more later. Wander and become disoriented. That one I will talk about a lot. Show signs of agitation, depression, or withdrawal when left alone for any period of time. Well, I know my mother-in-law, who we have finally had to put into memory care, every time we go and visit her, she becomes very agitated and depressed when we get ready to leave. So I know this kind of thing happens, and I'm sure you've experienced it. Attempt to pursue former interests or hobbies. Yes. The problem is many of them are dangerous type hobbies. Men especially, a lot of them were into woodworking or other things that they cannot do anymore, but they don't understand that. And I'm sure that all of you have experienced some of these things. All right. Make sure if you have a loved one at home, if you have an emergency number, have it close to the telephone and have it in large numbers. Make sure that the phone has very big dialing numbers on it and that they know how to use it. But don't think for a minute that they will. Now, use an answering machine. I definitely use an answering machine because I found out my mother-in-law has subscribed to a number of magazines and answered yes to just about every solicitor call that came in. I think if we had allowed it to go much longer, both she and us would be bankrupt paying her bills. Use an answering machine. Make sure that, and if you use an answering machine, I'm just going to give you a personal tip, put it where they don't know where it is, or they can't get to it readily, along with the phone. Okay? Install smoke alarms. How many people in here don't have smoke alarms? Now, I know nobody's going to raise their hand on that one. All right, some of the others, avoid the use of flammable and volatile compounds near gas appliances. Well, that just makes sense, does it not? That's why I'm not going to go over every one of these verbatim. I am going to assume that many of you have some common sense, or a lot, okay? Avoid the use of extension cords. How many people in here use extension cords? All right? How many people have walked around to see where those extension cords are? One. Maybe 3 or 4. This is how my mother-in-law got hurt. One of the things that I have noticed, and I'm sure some of you will pick up on what I'm saying, is those that develop dementia also develop a gait walking. As the dementia progresses, I teach law enforcement to watch for that gait. We call it the Alzheimer's shuffle. And everybody would recognize it as short, gated steps. Now, what do you think happens if they get around cords with that kind of gait? They get tangled in them, and they fall. This is what happened to my mother-in-law. He ended up with a crushed shoulder. This also goes for some other things in the house, too, that we'll talk about. Cover unused electrical outlets with child-proof plugs. Remember, and I think sometimes we tend to forget that many of these people, they're not dumb. Yeah, they've got some cognitive problems, but they're not dumb, and they still feel like they can do the things that they used to do, like plugging things into the wall. Many of them can't accomplish it, though. Good way to get them electrocuted. Red tape around floor vents. How many in here, just out of curiosity, I know a lot of, in the north, there were a lot of furnaces and so forth that had floor outlets for heat. If you have that in your home, line them with red tape. Red is a universal sign of what? Unsafe, stop. Many, many dementia patients will walk on these things in bare feet, and what do you think the result is? They get hot in the winter, do they not? Radiators, other heating devices. Check for adequate lighting. I know as I get older, my vision is not as good as it used to be. What do you think is happening with people that have cognitive disorders that have vision problems? Not only do they not see as well, but they don't comprehend it as well as to what they're seeing. If you have stairs, put your light switches at the top and the bottom of the stairs. You see, a lot of these things, you people already know. As I said earlier, I'm here just to remind you. Just when you leave here today, what I'm hoping is that you'll take all of this stuff, these handouts, and just do a walk around of your home, especially not just if you have somebody, a non-cognitive person in your home. Do it for yourself. How many people have heard stories where people are trying to walk through the house at night because they think they know the home so well, and they trip over something that's been there for years? Like cords or all these other kind of things. You know, I know that, you know, we hear safety, we hear safety, we hear safety, and all of a sudden it gets to the point, it's like studying constitutional law. Anybody in here ever done that? It is boring. You hear it and you hear it and you hear it, and finally you just kind of just tune it out. And that's what we do with safety. As I alluded earlier, there are ways to check on that. Just watch people. Make sure computer equipment and accessories are put away, or at least locked up, where they cannot get into them. Fish tanks. Something you would never think about, fish tanks. Well, you take a dementia patient and they decide they want to feed the fish. The coordination is not good to start with, am I right? What do you think can happen? It's predictable. Very. Outside approaches to the house. How many of y'all have done a survey of the outside of your house? The hands keep getting less and less. One of the things that I've noticed about some of the dementia patients that have problems is if you do not have a clearly defined walkway. A walkway that does not have gravel in it. Gravel is an unsteady base, and they slip, and they can't get good footing. Make sure that your walkways are lighted and your doors are lighted so they can see them and see them well. If you have foliage that hides part of the walkway or something, trim it back. That's not only good for them, it could be good for you too. Place a small bench or table by the entry door to hold parcels. Well, I think that's more for you than it is for them. Just think about it. How many of us go to the front door and try to unlock it and you're holding about 3 or 4 things in your hands? Works well, doesn't it? Real well. Consider a no soliciting sign. I think you ought to do that anyway. I know I have. Entryways, big ones, scatter rugs or throw rugs. If you can't secure them to the floor, don't have it. Many people, cognitive people, slip on these things. What do you think a person with dementia that has the gait that I described is going to do? Texture strips or non-skid wax on any hardwood floors or tile. Kitchen. Well, to sum all that up, I'm going to give you some very good advice. At least I think it, keep them out of the kitchen. Unless you're in there with them. You know, many people realize that a person has a cognitive disorder, and this is the first place they realize it. Because of them trying to cook and not being able to do it, or leaving the stove on, or some other appliance that's in the kitchen itself. Unless you're with them, they don't need to be in there. Now, is that going to be an easy task? No. Can I give you any tips? No. You're just going to have to work with it. Bedroom. This is where my mother-in-law had her big problem. And she had it because she was getting out of bed at night to go to the restroom. No night light. Now, whose fault is all that? Okay, I'm going to have to fess up. Was I following my own advice? Apparently not. No night light with an extension cord that extended out the side of the night table that she got tangled up in and fell. Electric mattress pads, I would caution you against using those because they don't know how to adjust them. And even though you may adjust it for them, during the night, what's going to keep them from wanting to readjust it? Either everybody's paying very close attention or you're all going to sleep. I'm not sure which. Bathroom, never leave them in the bathroom alone. There's a lot of pitfalls in the bathroom they can get into. Razor blades, sundry items, medicines they should not be taking, but feel like maybe they should and do. Many of these are redundant, are they not? So when you walk through your house, just look and see all the different things that repeat themselves in every room. Matches and cigarette lighters. They don't need them. They don't need them. They don't need to be smoking. I'll back up to this last one, remote controls for TV, DVD. Did I not tell you a story about that one? Anybody else that lived that particular situation? If you haven't, you will. Laundry room, keep the laundry room door locked. They don't need to be in there doing laundry. I think we could do away with all the rest of them and just lock the door. Now, how do you keep them out of there? Well, here's a tip. Put a big stop sign on the door. Seriously, universally, they recognize stop. Because when you're dealing with cognitive disorders, you're dealing first with what? Short-term memory. What is a stop sign? Long-term memory. They will recognize that. And I'll give you a couple of situations that will reinforce that in a minute. Garage, shed, or basement. What are they doing in there? They don't need to be in there. So you see, I'm keeping to my word. I'm not going to go down each one of these things. Okay, this one is my forte. Wandering. The first thing I'm going to tell you goes against everything you have probably never heard. Some of you may have heard it from other places. 20 years ago, we started Project Lifesaver, and we did it just for this. So law enforcement would have a better chance of finding a person quickly before harm came to them. And we do it with radio transmitter wristbands, that we can track the radio signal. Now, what I'm going to tell you is, people that have dementia do not wander. Everybody's looking, what? Well, it's right up there, wandering. Well, what is wandering, how do you define wandering? To walk around aimlessly with no intent or purpose. I'm here to tell you that these people have a purpose. They have an intention. We've coined the phrase, excuse me, they have a mission. Your New Jersey weather's playing heck with my sinuses. They have a mission. They know what they're going to do. They know where they're going. Problem is, they can't accomplish it. Or they can't get to where they're going from where they're at. I look at wandering and falls as the two most dangerous situations there are for people with dementia. Now, why do I consider wandering, and I use that term so that you'll keep with me as to what I'm talking about, so dangerous? Because the clock is working against us. When they go out, oftentimes they are not dressed for the weather or the environment. Many times they get out at times at dark, night. They become easy prey for anybody out there that has bad intentions. When I say the clock is working against us, we've got about 24 hours to locate them and bring them home before we can be reasonably certain something has happened. They are either injured or worse. Because a person that wanders will go until they can't go any further. They're either injured, stopped by an obstacle, or worse. Now, how do we stop them from wandering or going on a mission? Well, let me give you some things that I have told law enforcement. Listen to them. What are they saying? Many of the law enforcement people that do Project Lifesaver have come back to me and said, well, you called it. Are they talking about going home? Okay, in your mind, their home is where? Where they're at. Not in their mind. Their home may be 20 years in the past. Listen to them. If they start talking about, I need to go home, I want to go home, get ready. you are just about to witness an imminent wandering incident. Because they're going to get out. Now, the first thing I'll tell you is you can secure your house just like a penitentiary, and they're still going to be able to get out if they want to bad enough. If that's not true, why do we have prison breaks? You know, how secure are prisons? Because these people that are suffering dementia, as I said earlier, are not dumb, they're not stupid. I'll give you an example. We had a gentleman in the program, we took him, finally he got to the point that his wife took him, I should say, to a memory care unit. Well, the memory care unit, just as soon as he got there, the first thing they said is, well, he doesn't need that thing anymore. We're a lockdown unit. We got a cipher lock on the door. Everybody know what a cipher lock is? It's the one that you push the numbers in the sequence. Okay, fine. That was on a Friday afternoon. Monday morning, I got a call from the wife. Would you go back and put that bracelet back on him? Well, sure. What happened? 30 minutes from the time he got in there, he figured out the cipher code and was gone. Then, one of the things we used to do is sit in memory care units, just to observe. Has anybody ever gone in a memory care unit and observed the greeter? The greeter is the one that will stand right there at the lockdown doors, and as you come in, they greet you. How are you today? Everything fine? I got the door. They got it all right, they're right out of it. So never underestimate what these people can accomplish. We had one gentleman that had medicinal dementia. This happened because he was suffering from cancer, and every time they gave him his medicine, he went into dementia. Now, to show you the lengths that some people will do, he broke out a front window to get out of the house, to go home. Now, he had been living in this house for almost 30 years, where it was his home. Or you'll hear things like, I need to pick up the kids. Or I've got to go to work. I make a point of sitting in the memory care unit where my mother is right now, just observing and listening, and I hear this all the time. Or they're testing the doors to see if one of them's unlocked or they can get through it. The memory care unit my mother-in-law's in has a doorbell, so, you know, we visit, we want to get out, we ring the doorbell. What do you think that doorbell does all day long? People have watched, they figured it out, they know, ring the doorbell. So now they're trying to figure some other way of letting people in and out. So these are the things you've got to be concerned about when you're talking about wandering, and wandering can happen any time of the day or night, in any weather. You hear a lot about sundowning. Does everybody know what sundowning is? Well, it's people with dementia tend to get their days and nights and their time clock mixed up. Sundowning is when they are described as getting more active in the evening. Why? Because one of the things, if you notice, many of them tend to doze and sleep on and off all day long. So in the evening, they're refreshed. They're ready to go. And they get more hyperactive. This is the time you've got to be careful. Or in the middle of the night. Now, how do you defeat that? Well, certainly put alarms on the doors. But I will give you an afterthought on that too. How many memory care units, and I ask this as a general question, have you ever been in where there were alarms on doors? How often is the alarm paid attention to? Why? Because they hear it all the time. So if you're going to put an alarm on your door, make it loud and make it where it is disturbing to you so that you don't sleep through it. Now, a lot of burglar alarm companies offer the chimes when you open and close the door. I can tell you for a fact you can sleep right through those. You want something that's raucous and loud. Other things that have been done to help with this, disguise the doors. Put curtains over them. Where it looks like it's not a door, it looks like it's a window. Or the simple one that I gave you a few minutes ago, put a stop sign right on the door. Now, is this gonna work for everyone? No, you're gonna have to play with some things. Make sure you have got keyless locks, deadbolts, where you have to have a key on both sides. Make sure your windows are secure. Now, I'm not talking about putting bars over them, but make sure they're secure. If it comes to that point, and the problem with a wandering situation is everybody says, well, when did they start wandering? Well, nobody knows. Many doctors have said, well, in the first, the mild and medium stages. I would say that's probably the most prevalent time, yes. Many of them that wander will not wander for several years, and all of a sudden they'll start. And the thing that I hear, and I would suggest very strongly, not because I'm promoting my business, it's a nonprofit, so we don't make any profit. Check with your sheriff's office or your police department, see if they offer Project Lifesaver. So that if they do get out, they can at least be tracked. Now, and I'm sure I'm going to get questions on some of the other things out here, GPS and so forth, and I'll be glad to talk to you afterwards, because that's going to be a lengthy conversation. But you're going to have to do things and take measures. Why? Because if they do start this tendency, some of them do it a lot. They say, well, how many people wander that have Alzheimer's? Well, 70% of them will do it, at least once. 60% of that 70% will do it repeatedly. Now, as I said before, listen to them. They'll give you clues. They'll let you know that something's going on within their mind that they need to accomplish. Any questions on the so-called wandering or mission? Yes, sir. I'm going to take questions as we go, okay? Yes.
So, from a police department standpoint, is the wandering elderly person different than a runaway or lost child? Because it seems like you're saying that they'll respond quickly versus like a lost child. They'll say, well, let's see if they ran away in 24 hours and gone, and all of a sudden, things happen.
Well, they will search for a lost child. They will not, because a lost child is not necessarily always an emergency with the clock's ticking against you, unless there are circumstances around that disappearance that tend to escalate it. Many children, let's face it, and I know, I raised 4 boys, they just tend to go off. And then all of a sudden they'll show back up. Where a person with Alzheimer's or dementia is not going to just show back up. They're going to get into trouble. And we have the same thing occurs with children with autism. Now the clock on autism is different from the one on Alzheimer's. We got 15 minutes with autism. And if anybody would like to discuss that with me, I'll be glad to do it after. Okay? Any other questions? No questions on wandering? Yes, ma'am.
I always thought that you shouldn't put the double locks in where you need a key, that it was, I think in some towns, it's illegal, because then you can't get out, in case of a fire or something like that.
I can't comment on towns and their ordinances and so forth. I can only tell you what we've had from experience. That if you have a deadbolt lock that you can turn and easily open, if you can do it, so can they. If you're going to have that kind of lock, make sure you have a good alarm on that door. Okay? There's another question? Or just safety in general. Okay? Moving along. Do you have a fence? If you have a fence, make sure the gate's locked. That will help keep this in. One town in Europe experimented with something that worked very well. They had a bus stop right outside that no buses came. They just put up a bus stop. And then it was a nursing or an assisted living facility with a memory care unit. And the people, when they go out, they would go to the bus stop and sit down and wait for them. So they found them very easily. Now, that was not a 100%. That was one of the things that you do. But it worked pretty well for them. Now, they're also telling you, have some identification on them. I'm the proponent of the tracking unit. But have an ID band on them as well. Because they're liable to be noticed by law enforcement or some good Samaritan that will call law enforcement, and then they can read it and pick up on it and call a phone number. And one of the things that people ask me, and what do we do in the case of a disaster? Well, if they don't have a wristband, take masking tape, put it inside their clothes, and write the information in there. That way, if law enforcement or a public safety person finds them, they can, in checking them, they'll see that. Make sure you include good information. Your name, your contact, your phone number, what their condition is. Is it Alzheimer's? Is it Lewy body? What is it? One of the things that we do is train law enforcement on how to deal with people that have dementia. The doctor was talking about agitation. Well, I have found that once we track one and locate them, that's only half the job. The other half is now we got to get them home. And they're not always willing participants. Okay? Keep an article of unwashed clothing they get out. If they don't have a tracking band, keep an article of their clothing that has not been washed. Why would you do that? Tracking dogs. Yep. Keep a up-to-date picture. I have been on many, many searches where the person would hand me a picture that was 20 years old. Well, it's better than nothing, but it is almost nothing. People tend to change in 20 years. I can attest for that. 20 years ago, I had hair. Don't anymore, or very little. Yes, ma'am.
Could you just comment on the ability to drive? Like, who's responsible for removing the license? Does the state, the caregiver, the doctor, I'm sure that it's a very difficult situation, but is it law-driven?
Not anywhere that I know of. And I know because I became the enforcer with my mother-in-law. But fortunately, what happened with my mother-in-law is we enlisted the doctor, the neurologist, who wrote a letter to the Division of Motor Vehicles. The Division of Motor Vehicles sent my mother the letter saying, guess what? You can't drive anymore. You got to turn your license in. Well, that was not a very happy night at my house because I was the one that had to get the license. And she emphatically told me, you can have the damn car, but you ain't getting my license. Well, and why is that? Because now you're taking away what? Their last vestige, interest, and independence. So it's not an easy fix. I have had people tell me, and I've seen it done where, okay, they can't drive anymore, we'll go take the ignition, we'll disable the ignition of the car. Well, then I've seen them go out and call a mechanic and have it repaired. So, it's the kind of thing that I would get with the doctor and check with your Division of Motor Vehicles. See what they require. Florida, just a letter from a neurologist that says this person is a danger on the roadway. And that's all it took. Getting the keys, that's another story. Yes, sir.
One thing I'd like to add when you mentioned about the identification.
Oh, thank you.
What I do besides the identification is I have a printed list of all her medications and who prescribed them. I put it in her wallet, I put another copy in her purse. I keep a copy with me whenever we go visit other doctors. And I'm constantly updating and constantly replacing it because many times she'll see it in there, thinks it's an old piece of paper and throw it out. But I check every day, make sure it's in there, just in case something happens where, yeah, oh, and I include her allergies. You know, I don't want her to get hurt and get a shot of penicillin when she's allergic to it. So that's in addition to the other things you've mentioned.
No, and I think all those are very good ideas. You know, one of the things that we teach in law enforcement, just because you see somebody out in the street looks out of place does not mean they have Alzheimer's. It takes a little investigation. So those are the kind of things that are good to know and good to have and good to pass on. Yes, ma'am.
As an occupational therapist, I wanted to address the driving issue again. And yes, it is the doctor's, it's got to come from the doctor to stop driving. But I have found working with people that also, there are certified driving rehab specialists. There are driving programs. And if you can work with an occupational therapist who has a relationship to get this person to JFK or Kessler. I'm up in North Jersey, so I've got, we've got Helen Hayes, and they have driving programs. Driving rehab specialists have the authority under the Division of Motor Vehicles, or the Motor Vehicle Commission these days, to recommend that you don't drive. And it's not just, I mean, they do cognitive screenings, they do visual screenings, they do reaction screenings before they even will take you on the road. So I've found that it takes, it saves relationships with the doctor, because doctors don't want to tell you not to drive because you may not go back to them. It threatens that relationship. I'm a driving generalist, so I feel like I'm safe because I don't have the authority to tell people to stop. And it saves the relationship with the children and the family that have grave concerns over the driving. I don't know if that helps.
I think what we found in Project Lifesaver, we're in all 50 states and we're in Canada. Every jurisdiction is different. There's no two that are alike. So you're going to have to check with your Division of Motor Vehicles or whatever their title. See what assistance they can offer you, because is driving a dangerous situation. That coupled with the wandering, we have located people 25, 30 miles away from their house. So we know it's dangerous. All right, any other questions? Let's see what's on the next slide. Rummaging and hiding. I know this happens with my mother-in-law. She collects things. In fact, in the memory care unit that she's at, we have a gentleman by the name of Jerry. He walks around the memory care unit and collects anything that is not bolted down, and that includes chairs. So they will pick up things, they will hide things. You're going to have to do as you said, you're going to have to stay on top of this all the time, because some of the things they're picking up could be dangerous. Okay? Remove spoiled food, well, you should be doing that anyway. Check trash containers before you empty them. Don't tell them what they might have thrown away. Something that may have been valuable, such as identification or anything. Hallucinations. I know in Parkinson's hallucinations are a big thing. My mother-in-law suffers from them greatly. We will hear my father-in-law has been passed away for 7 years now, but she sees him every day. We go in to visit her, and he just left. Or, he was there last night, didn't you see him as you came in? Well, we do the thing called validation. Everybody know what that is? You go along with it. You just go along with it. Because one of the things I found about a person with dementia, and I consider this part of safety, don't argue with them. Don't tell them that the sky is not green, it's blue, because what happens when you start doing that? They get mad, they get frustrated, and I've seen them get violent, trying to make their point. In fact, I had to break up a fight in the memory care unit just last week, where they were told the man something, I don't know what it was, the next thing I know, he's assaulting one of the aides. So don't think that this can't turn ugly and do it real quick. And I think that is probably one of the things that I'm gonna have to include in the slides. Validate what they're saying. Because in 10 minutes, it's all gonna be different anyway. Okay? My mother-in-law, as I said, sees all kinds. The other day she started handing me something. There was nothing in her hand, but she couldn't tell me what it was. But I took it and put it in my pocket. That satisfied her. So don't be afraid to play the role with them. Validate them. And they will see all kinds of different things. All right, here's some other tips. Paint a light color to reflect more light. The one thing I have noticed about dementia patients is they tend to be in a much mellower mood if they're not in a dark surrounding. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm just telling you what I have gone through 20 years of experience of picking up on. Why is that? Well, you're going to have to ask the doctor. I guess it has something to do with depression, and the darkness brings on depression. Adequate lighting, reduce glare, remove or cover mirrors. Sometimes that can cause them to become confused and frightened. I have never observed that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, so just be aware. Vary the home environment as little as possible. If you've got them at home with you, don't go changing the furniture around. It is very disorienting to them, and it could cause wandering incidents. Okay, and I think we just talked about don't confront a person that has Alzheimer's. Like I said, you can build up that frustration really quick, and they can become violent very quick. Any other questions on anything I've covered? As I said, I wasn't here to regurgitate all this stuff to you. I want you to just take the handout, think about some of the things we've said, go home and do your own home survey. If you have someone, not just if you have someone living with you that has dementia, but do it for your own self. And I reiterate, if you think we're so safe, pay attention to the drivers around you going home. You'll see how safe we really are and how we practice safety. I've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you very much. One more hand for Chief Saunders, please. Very informative. So just a quick couple of housekeeping reminders. We are doing memory screenings. If you're interested in getting screening, please go see Amanda at the front. And also make sure you stop by our exhibitor tables. We have representatives from Care to Caregivers, Senior Helpers, and Arden Courts. And also, I just want to recognize the sponsors who are here today, AZI and Senior Helpers. So we really appreciate all your help in being able to bring this tour to New Jersey. So for our next session, we have a panel. I'd like to introduce our panelists, Michelle Scanlon, Alex Schenker, and Jennifer Rose Surface. Michelle is a certified elder law attorney practicing with the New Jersey Elder Law Center at Mandelbaum, Salzburg. She also works in the firm's Trust, Estates, Special Needs, and Education Law practice groups. Michelle is a member of the National Elder Law Foundation, and she has a background in assisting families affected by Alzheimer's as well as children with disabilities. Alex is an advocate for high-quality senior care. He is the owner of Senior Helpers in Central New Jersey and Somerset. He has a passion for making a meaningful impact and is fully committed to providing the best possible in-home care to seniors throughout the region. Jenny is a business development specialist and a certified dementia practitioner with Arden Courts, where she has worked for almost 4 years. Arden Courts provides care to individuals diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and other dementia-related illnesses. Jenny has been a guest speaker at numerous conferences, providing her expertise on the behavioral, physical, and emotional changes which commonly occur in each stage of dementia. So having a strong support network for caregivers is critical. You need it to be able to reduce stress, prevent burnout, and ultimately provide the best possible care for your loved one. So Michelle, Alex, and Jenny, you're going to offer you some really important tips and practical strategies on how to build that structure and aid in caregiving. Please join me in welcoming them.
Hello. All right. Again, my name is Michelle Scanlon. I'm an attorney. And I'm going to talk to you today about some 8 common mistakes that people do make during long-term care planning. So when you have a loved one who is going through dementia or Alzheimer's, sometimes people talk to their neighbors, they talk to their friends, and they take some advice without kind of seeking legal advice. So I'm going to go through, and I'd like some participation from the audience as we go, but let's start. So does anyone recognize this guy? Can you remember one of his songs? Will you still love me when I'm 64? So everyone ages, and we think about the aging process as being scary, and there's people out there to help you through this process. So the first thing that I want to talk about is the first common mistake that people make as they're planning. They decide to give their house or assets to one of their children or split it amongst their children. Does anyone know why this is a bad idea? Any volunteers out there? Nobody? Okay, back there?
Because it's a single house and multiple people who have different agendas.
Okay, yeah, that's one thing, you know, conflict when you have more than one person owning something. But the biggest thing here is that when you transfer a property, such as like a home, to your children, you're actually losing a step up in basis that would happen upon your death. So there's tax consequences to it. So you could have bought your house for, I'm going to use low numbers, simple, let's keep it easy, $20. But now it's worth $100,000. If you gift that house to your children are going to have to pay taxes upon it. So if you pass the property from a will or at the time of your death, it steps up to the date of death value. So that's something that people really don't think about and just, you know, I'm going to protect my home for Medicaid and just transfer the home without really thinking about what tax consequences there could be. The other thing that you want to think about is that whoever you're transferring it to, your child, your brother, whoever it may be, they can have creditor issues. So while you're trying to protect it for yourself, they can have somebody come after the home because now it's in their name. Another one that goes along with this is the fact that if you want to give it to your child, I know everyone wants to think everyone can get married and have a long marriage, divorce happens, and you can get some very greedy divorce attorneys who want to come after that property, although we all know it's still mom and dad's, but it's now been titled into the child's name. So if any of you are thinking about transferring a home to another individual, this is something that you should really seek legal guidance to do, because we could talk through all the consequences with you before doing a decision like that. So that's the first mistake people usually make. The next one is people assume because they're on Medicare that it's going to pay for everything. Medicare does not pay for long-term care. So it's not going to cover your assisted living, it's not going to cover a nursing home, it doesn't cover your home health aides. It's really a common mistake that people make. So there is a difference between Medicare and Medicaid, okay? The next one is probably the number one thing that we see is that people are in denial. They just think that nothing's going to happen, it's going to be an easy process. But that's not really the case. Things happen. Even young individuals can get into an accident. So things happen and there's planning that you need to do. So there's something called a durable power of attorney. There's also something called a healthcare power of attorney. These are all things that you should be thinking about for yourselves as well as your loved ones who you're taking care of. Just because you have a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's, it doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot execute a durable power of attorney or a healthcare power of attorney. It's an individualized kind of assessment, but at that time, either our office or whoever you go to would either seek outside assistance from a healthcare provider or do some type of consultation to determine whether somebody has capacity to execute those documents. The level is not as high as many people think. They have to have a basic understanding that they're appointing somebody else to make decisions on their behalf. And then pretty much from there, it's a much better thing to have than not have, okay? Okay, the other mistake that we see is that people assume Medicaid is for the poor. There's actually a lot of strategies that can qualify somebody sooner for Medicaid. So an individual can only have $2,000 to their name. That's nothing in New Jersey. That's nothing really anywhere. But that's not the first time you can qualify. There's other strategies such as trust planning, annuities, or gifting strategies that we can talk over with each family and decide whether those would be appropriate for you. So don't assume that because you have more than $2,000. We have clients who sometimes have, it's a married couple, one of them needs to go on to Medicaid. They have $500,000. An individual can only have that $2,000, and then the healthy spouse can keep up to $126,000 and change. In New Jersey, $126,000 is not that much. Somebody could live another 20 years, and that's not going to be enough for them. So there's planning strategies that we would do to get you qualified sooner and not spend down all your money, okay? The next one is home health care aides. So a lot of people would like to stay in their home, and that's great. We love when clients are able to age in place and things like that, but there's things that go along with doing this. You need to make sure you have appropriate documents to basically show that there is some type of caregiver agreement. So basically a lot of things that we're seeing now is that people are trying to save as much money as possible. They're going on Craigslist, they have a friend who can help them out, that can be a home health aide. But they have no contract, they have no insurance to cover that person, and basically they're giving them cash. That can create a couple of issues. The first one is the cash. In Medicaid's eyes, they're going to look at anything that's going to another individual. They want to track where all this money is going. If you don't have an agreement, how can you show them that you were paying them for their care? These are all things that you need to think about when you're deciding to go through either an agency or a private individual. The insurance. When you go through an agency, you have somebody covering any slip and falls, like it comes along with the insurance. When you're having an individual come into your home, that's not necessarily the case. You have to think of maybe getting an umbrella insurance policy or something like that to cover those types of situations, okay? They failed to include the elective share in their last will and testament. So this was a little bit more complicated, but it basically, in the eyes of Medicaid, every spouse is entitled to an elective share. So you can't just go around disinheriting spouses all the time. In New Jersey, they think if you want to disinherit your spouse, you should basically get divorced. But we all know with Medicaid and everything like that, divorce is not always the answer. What you can do is basically have a provision in your will that allows for the elective share to come outright, and then everything else, you can protect it in what's called a supplemental needs trust. So this is a type of planning that we do to protect some of the assets if one spouse passes away before the other, okay? This is another common one. So I talked about the durable power of attorney. The durable power of attorney is basically a document that allows somebody else to act on your behalf, whether it's your credit cards, your bank accounts, your IRA, they have authority to act on your behalf. When people don't have those documents, usually what they're doing is just adding a kit to their bank account. Oh, so you can make payments for me, do whatever you need to do. But what it does is it causes some confusion. You could have 5 kids, and now you only have one person on your bank account. So what happens to that money when you pass away? It passes by operation of law. It doesn't go according to your will, so everything is going to go to that one child rather than getting split. And we all want to think our kids are going to get along after we pass away, but that's not always the case. there's a lot of arguments and things whether I was supposed to get this or, so the better thing to do is to have a power of attorney rather than having individual kids on accounts, okay? So there's something out there, I don't know if we have any veterans or family members that have veterans, but there's something out there called the Veterans Pension that not many people know about. It's a pension out there that's supposed to help with long-term care planning. So if you have home health aides, you're looking to go to an assisted living, it's basically a pension that can give you extra income to support your needs. So if you have any veterans that served during wartime, it's definitely something to come speak to me about after, and then we can set up a consultation to talk about it more. Okay, so again, this just goes back to what I was saying before. Before transferring a home to a child, before listening to your neighbors, you really should be seeking legal advice for these types of decisions. Most people go to someone for tax advice and things like that. Elder planning is something that you should seek out specialized counsel for. You shouldn't go to your general practitioner and have them draft a will for you. There's things that, as you're aging, are required in those documents that somebody who doesn't really work with this type of population won't understand and won't be able to do for you. So that's it for me, just to let you know. We're going to be answering questions and I'm going to pass it on, but our firm also offers an hour-and-a-half free consultation. So if anyone's interested, I have business cards and brochures in the back. Thanks.
Can you hear me? I like what the previous presenter. Can you hear me? Yeah. I like what the previous presenter did. He came down and he interacted. So feel free to interrupt me. I like when people interrupt me with questions. So when breakfast was being served, lots of people came to our table and I was asking them, why are you here, what happened? And everyone had similar stories. They had somebody with dementia, with Alzheimer's, and they came to learn. Fantastic. That's what we need to do. Because every day I deal with families who are in a crisis mode. Somebody has been diagnosed with dementia, and maybe that has been going on for several years, and they do not know what to do. And now they're scrambling, and now they're making erratic decisions. And you don't want to be in that situation. So, as you have learned today, when somebody in your family is diagnosed with dementia, you are not alone. There's a lot of support out there. And the fact that you're here is a plus, you're learning. The first thing that you should understand is how to communicate with someone who has dementia. The previous speaker gave a few examples. I want to point out to a few things. You're going to hear that all of a sudden your mom is disagreeing with you and you're going to argue and say, Mom, you already had breakfast. How many times can I tell you? You already had breakfast. Do not argue. Go along, just like the previous person said. Instead of arguing, saying, oh, you have a wonderful appetite, that's so good. Remember when we were young, we used to eat all day long? Oh my God, your cooking was fantastic. Move the conversation onto a different topic that's going to be pleasant to that person, okay? If they're repeating the same thing again and again and again, don't even blink. Go with the flow. Try to change the subject. I came to visit a family a few years ago, and the daughter was there and her mother was there. The mother had a PhD. She was well known in her field. She was an educator. She had dementia. And she was telling me the same thing several times. She was asking me the same question several times. And I was answering that question again and again and again, as though she asked me that question for the very first time. The daughter was also well educated. Said, Mom, if you don't want Alex here, just say so. Stop pestering him with the same question. I told the daughter, you know what? I got it. You have some work to do. Go away, basically, right? And we started this service to provide service for this lady, and everything was going well because our caregivers knew how to communicate with someone who has dementia. So knowing how to communicate is the first thing people have to learn, because if you're the primary caregiver and you continue to argue and you continue to become agitated, that is not good for you. Now, I mentioned to a few people who stopped by before the conference, and I told them that a caregiver is as important, or maybe even more important, than the person who has Alzheimer's or dementia. Because the primary caregiver is the one who is providing the support. So your health and your well-being is extremely important, right? So you have to take care of yourself. Because if you cannot, who is going to take care of your loved one? There are several options on where the person with dementia can live and can stay, and we'll talk about that. If they're at home and they're living alone, it is possible for them to continue to stay at home and live alone as long as it's a safe environment. I'm so glad the previous speaker went into a lot of details on what it takes to create a safe environment. I'm not going to repeat that, don't worry. But it's important to do that. It's important for the person to maintain their independence. Very often I come into the house to meet with the family, and the person is living alone, and adult children stop by, and they would say, we can talk, my mom can sit in the kitchen, she doesn't understand anything. I said, no, let your mom come here, we'll talk together, we'll discuss things together. The person who has dementia is a person. It doesn't matter what level of dementia they have, they still have feelings, and it's extremely important to get that person involved. So if you want your loved one to stay at home, make sure it's safe. Maybe they need some home care assistance. I'm not trying to drum up business for myself. There's 1,600 companies in New Jersey providing home care. Just make sure what the attorney told you. Make sure you work with a reputable company. But make sure that you spend a few dollars on making sure the environment is safe and the person who needs support gets that support if they want to stay at home. Most people want to stay at home. They also need to be socially engaged. So the caregiver will engage them in physical stimulating activity and mentally stimulating activities, and will help them with whatever gaps they may have. So for example, we had a client years ago. She had, medium level of dementia. She loved to cook when she was young, but she couldn't cook anymore. So our caregiver was cooking with her, cooking, quote unquote. She was sort of messing in the kitchen, and the caregiver was doing the actual cooking, but the client was extremely happy. And then they would go around the neighborhood delivering pies to neighbors, right? So it's very important to focus on what the person with dementia enjoys doing. That is the key with whatever you do. It's not what you want to do. It's what's going to make their life pleasant. If they like to travel and they want to look at the old photographs, do that. If they love gardening and now they cannot garden the way they used to, pretend that you are helping them and that they're in charge, while in fact you are doing all the planting. But at the end of the day, those people, the person with dementia is happy. The quality of life, that's what's important. There are some things that cannot be changed. You listen to this lecture, the doctor was very honest, there's no silver bullet, right? Well, one thing, in addition to dancing, you focus on the quality of life. Do things, encourage things that are going to be pleasant for the person who has dementia. We had a client, she liked to fold towels all day long. And to you and to me, it looks like silly. She loved it. Our caregiver will give her towels. She would fold them very nicely. She would compliment her saying, wow, you're doing it so great. I cannot keep up with you. Here's your next bunch of towels. And that was going on for hours. It may look silly to you, may sound silly to you, but that person was enjoying those hours. So from her point of view, she was having a good day. So if you want someone to stay at home, make sure you have the support at home. Make sure the home is safe. Make sure you have caregivers or other family members who are out there. Social interaction is also important. In your community, there must be adult day centers. They don't need to go there every day, but once or twice a week, or maybe more often, that's a great way for them to socialize with other people with similar conditions. And those adult day centers have programs specifically for people who have dementia. So explore that. Explore it now before you even need that. There are assisted living facilities, right? I'm not paid. I'm not getting a commission, but we'll talk about that, so I will not talk about that. So the assisted living facilities that have memory care units, specifically for people with dementia. There are retirement communities that are equipped to do that. And you know what? Maybe at this point of time, you will not need any of this. But the fact that you are here is fantastic. Go out and explore adult day centers. Go out, talk to home care agencies, go and visit assisted living facilities, and hopefully you will not need any of that. That would be great. There's no cost, there's no obligation. You go on a tour, they may even give you free coffee. I don't know. You do that? Lunch, right? Do that exploration. We had a client who signed an agreement with us and saying, I may need you. And we signed the paperwork, and that was that. A year later, she called. My mom needs help. She did not have to scramble. She knew exactly where her mom wanted to live. She knew exactly what home care agency she wanted to use. That door was prepared. But she did her homework a year ahead of time. So that's what I encourage you to do. There are lots of resources available. And it's your job to be prepared to go to have conversations, make the visits, and this way you have a plan. Work with a professional. I know I'm repeating myself. Make sure that you work with an attorney. There are other professionals. There are certified geriatric care managers. Geriatric care managers are the types of people who will sort of look at the big picture and will make recommendations. Here's what you need to do. Very often people, when they're in a panic, they're making irrational decisions. I get calls from families saying, I need somebody for 24 hours every day. And I am, hey, that's very expensive. I don't think we need to have that. Don't throw your money away just because you're in a panic. Geriatric care manager or an elder law attorney would be able to offer sound, independent, objective advice. Sometimes people who go with their heart make decisions that don't make sense. Okay? Nobody interrupted me with a single question. At least one question, please. Yes. I'll give you my microphone.
How difficult is it to use long-term care if you have it for dementia? And what kind of requirements do they ask you for as opposed to somebody who's just, old and sick and can't get dressed?
And you asked me that question, so I'll give the same answer. It depends on the long-term care insurance policy. Understand that the insurance companies are in the business of collecting money and they're trying to pay it out as little as possible. So, someone who has a diagnosis of dementia, usually the policy will require that the caregiver provides at least two assistance with at least 2 activities of daily living, sometimes 3, depending on the policy. And if the doctor says the person cannot be left alone, that's a good type of thing that will qualify you for the care. But don't take notes based on what I'm saying, because I'm the least qualified person to have that conversation with. That's where an attorney may come in. That's where your agent may come in. That's where the geriatric care manager may come in. Because every policy is different. There are lots of nuances on how to fill out the paperwork. It has to be done right, because the insurance company will look for every reason to deny your claim. I'll take one more question. I know I'm breaking rules. And then I'll, yeah?
Do you have any tips on how to possibly get someone who's independent, living prior, and no spouse to accept care in their home when they're in a level, like a moderate level dementia with confusion and agitation about that they don't need any help?
Thank you so much for asking this question. So when I come into the family family's home and the adult children, let's say the daughter, will usually meet me outside the door and will say, Mom will not accept you. Thank you for coming, whatever. Sometimes I even ask, do I need to bring a bulletproof vest, right? Because on the phone they're telling me, we're trying this, but I don't think it's going to work. Because my mom is independent, she has been independent all her life, she thinks she can do everything herself, she does not need any help, and I say, I have good news for you. She may have dementia, but in my mind she is normal. Would you want me to come into your house and give you a bath? You are normal. Okay? So what we try to do, there are lots of different tips depending on what's going on. The key is to get on the side of the client. I remember I was in the house and the two daughters ganged up on this lady and said, Mom, you need to have somebody 5 days a week, and you need this, and you need this, and you didn't take your medication, and they were embarrassing her. That's a no-no. You never want to embarrass the person with dementia. You don't want to embarrass any person. But the person with dementia may not even remember things. They still have feelings, as I said. You don't want to do that. So what I said is, I'm sorry, but I'm with your mom. I don't think she needs somebody 5 days a week. I think if we get somebody 1 day a week, just to stop by so they can do things together, and they will help you. And you know what? You can be a queen for that day. Let's pick Tuesday. On Tuesday, you'll be a queen. I said, I like that. And that's how we started service. And then we added more days. But that's a change for a person. It's a change for a person. It's a change for a family. They never had anyone in the home. Start slowly. And sometimes what I advise people to do is to start early, when the person is still physically able to do things, when dementia has not progressed. Introduce them to home care. Maybe if you're going on vacation, introduce them to the adult day center. Introduce them to adult day center, introduce them to the assisted living. They have respite programs, right? You're going on vacation for a week. Mom, you're going to stay in a resort for a week. Okay, let's see if she likes it. So when it's time to move into assisted living facility, it will not be a surprise. Never push someone, never force someone to do something. Never try to think logically. Try to put yourself into the shoes of the other person. Okay, I'll take more questions later.
Hi, I'm Jenny Rose Surface. I don't know how to follow Alex up. I think he answered a lot of questions and talking about long-term planning in general, as well as Michelle. But how do you know what level? How do you know when's the right time to make the move? How do you know when your loved one's ready for home care, assisted living, skilled nursing? How do you even know what all of those different levels of care mean? And I think Alex said it best. Do your research. Start doing your research now. Start today. You know that your loved one has this diagnosis, and unfortunately, the only thing that we know is set in stone with the dementia diagnosis is it's going to progress. We don't know when, we don't know how long it's going to take for it to progress, but we do know it's going to progress. So take those measures now. Start doing your research. Talk to home health agencies. Go and take a tour in an assisted living. Go and see the skilled facilities in your area. Have your homework done ahead of time because you don't want to be in a crisis situation. I think the question we get asked most often is, when do I know it's time? How do I know it's time for placement? How do I know I need assisted living? And oftentimes we look at the family and we say, safety. What is the safety of your loved one? And what is your safety? How has your life been affected? Do you lose sleep at night because you're worried about your loved one walking out of the house? Are you worried about them wandering? Think about the safety concerns that you have for them and yourself and make a list of those things. And if they've started to do some of those things, then most likely you need to start acting today because you don't want to wait for that crisis. You don't want to wait for them to end up in the hospital. It sounds harsh. We don't want to think of those unpleasant things, but you want to be prepared. You want to know that if You start to see more of those safety concerns happening, you're ready to make a decision, and you have your ducks in a row, and you can make that transition a little more seamless for yourself and your loved one. A little bit about Arden Courts. We were the first standalone memory care community in the country. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and yes, we are in assisted living, but we are so much more than that. We actually partner with AFA because we have a lot of the same philosophies. We believe in education, providing answers for the caregivers, providing them support, and I think that's one of the most important things you can do for yourself as a caregiver or someone affected by this disease in any capacity. Reach out and get the help. There's support groups, there's memory cafes, there's hotlines like AFA has. Get the support that you need, because you can be a better caregiver when you're taking care of yourself for your loved one. So Arden Courts, we actually were built from the ground up with the disease in mind. We spent 5 years of research and design working with Johns Hopkins to design our buildings. Because you guys know, living at home with your loved ones, I'm sure, that the disease is very specific to what they see visually, how they interact in their environment. So we wanted to build a community that took all of that into consideration. Our flooring, our wall color, our textures on the wall, the wallpaper, the heights of ceilings, length of hallways, all of those things that we don't really take into consideration when you're thinking of an environment for yourself or your loved one. But those are all very important with the disease progression. They can't see as well. They don't understand their surroundings. Clinical setting can be very upsetting for someone with dementia. So you want to do everything in your power to make it a home-like setting, and that's exactly what we did at Arden Courts. I could talk for hours about what went into designing Arden Courts to make it what it is today. But one thing I want you to take away about assisted livings or Arden Courts in general, you want to remember that reach out and get help from them, because they're not just a residential care setting. Arden Courts, we have monthly education from national speakers, continuing education, support groups, memory cafes. One of my locations alone, they have 5 different memory cafes that they offer out in their community. And I think that's one of the most important things to take away from anything that you took out of today. Take time for you and get the support that you need by doing things like this. By being at a conference, learning about the disease, understanding what your loved one's going through. And thank you to AFA for providing all of these resources and being somewhere that someone can get centralized information. So thank you to them, and thank you. We'll answer any questions that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions for our panel?
Good afternoon. Alex, I spoke with you before the program started, and one of the questions that I have is with respect to my mother, who is suffering from dementia. She's 88 years old. She's living independently currently. And I'm torn many times between doing things for her or letting her do some of the things that she attempts to do on her own. And one of those tasks is dinner time, lunchtime, preparing her meals. She often has a lot of stress and anxiety as she goes to the refrigerator to pull food out and place it on a plate to warm up in the microwave. And oftentimes she'll select items that are multiple meats or multiple vegetables and not providing a balanced plate. But nonetheless, it gives her stress as she does this. And depending upon the type of day that she may have had, I'll do those things for her to relieve her of that stress. But I'm torn between doing that and letting her learn from doing it herself to try to learn to do it more completely. And because she often then will say, well, you do it for me. And she won't do it on her own if I'm not there or someone is not there to do it for her. So how do you know when to make that decision to do it for her or to not, and just offer her guidance?
Is this still? It's on. Okay. So your mom will not learn from her mistakes. So forget that, okay? What you can do, you have to judge, is she jeopardizing her safety or not? So it seems like she's on the borderline jeopardizing her safety. So what you may want to do, you may want to have prepared meals that you already have ready, and she just needs to microwave them. This way she doesn't have to think about things, but she still feels independent because she's using a microwave, she's heating up the food, and she's preparing her own lunch. As long as she knows how to use microwave safely, that may be a good approach without taking her independence away and without jeopardizing safety. If you get to the point where she cannot use the microwave, where she cannot do any of those things, then either you have to be there or you have to hire someone to come in and help her with food preparation. And also you may want to look into Meals on Wheels. If she's eligible, that's a great program that will deliver meals to the house, and they may not be as tasty as what you prepare, I assume you're a good cook, but it's an option.
First of all, I want to thank everybody, the panel and everything. It's very informative. And a big takeaway message from the conference is to be prepared and not wait for a crisis. So this question is actually for the lawyer in terms of like a power of attorney, healthcare proxy, that you said we should all have even when we're young because there could be a car accident, whatever. At what age or stage do you feel it's important to do elder care planning in terms of positioning yourself for long-term care planning, insurance, and Medicare, Medicaid, and stuff like that?
Okay, there we go. So it really depends on the individual, but as soon as the age of 18, somebody can actually execute a healthcare power of attorney, a will. They can do that. So it's never too soon to do the process because it is a living document. Sometimes people have life events that change things. They get divorced, they remarry. Those are all things that normal people need to update their documents for. If there is a diagnosis, as soon as you get that diagnosis, you should probably start planning. If there's no diagnosis, there's preparation that you can do to avoid Medicaid coming after certain assets and different things like that. So I'd say early 60s, late 60s is a really good time to come in. Sometimes we'll actually have people come in, I'm like, you're too young to do some of the planning, but we'll put you on a follow-up to check in every couple of months to make sure that there hasn't been a diagnosis or things like that. We really pride ourselves as a firm that we're not going to draft you a document and then leave you alone. We have a client care coordinator on staff who actually is probably the nicest person I've ever met. Every client loves her, but she will walk you through a lot of the caregiving process herself. She's gone through it. Her father is actually in an assisted living, so she will walk you through the social side of things if I can't do anything legal for you. So just because somebody doesn't have a diagnosis or they do, it doesn't prevent them from coming in, getting some information, making sure they understand what they can and can't do. So even when people think it's too late, I say it's never too late because there's usually at least one thing we can help you with. So
We have time for one more question if there is. If not, one more question right here.
I'm a little confused about what a geriatric care thank you. I'm a little confused about what a geriatric care manager it is. Is it a gentleman from the agency? Who is that person and how do you pay them?
Right, you pay them by cash. No. Geriatric care manager is a certified person who can take the stress out of you thinking about what to do, right? If somebody is, for example, in a hospital, and now you need to put together an army of doctors and stay on top of them to make sure that they talk to each other, geriatric care manager will take care of that. If it's time to go home, geriatric care manager will advise you on which rehab to go to. If you need home care, they'll advise you on what home care. They'll handle all these things that will drive someone crazy because they are new to this and they don't know what to do. geriatric care manager will be looking at that. Some geriatric care managers meet with people who are getting old, but they don't need their service yet, and they're doing that prep work. Geriatric care manager may advise, go get that will.
So is that the same thing we have in health advocates?
It's sort of similar. Yeah, geriatric care manager is more than that.
Sometimes they have like a nurse's background or some type of medical background so that they're really understanding, like they can see signs of things that are evolving. We have a client that actually is here in New Jersey, but her only son lives in Israel. So that's like the perfect scenario where we usually have some type of geriatric care manager get involved so that he has somebody on the ground on a day-to-day basis. A lot of people have children out of state or things like that, or maybe they live 3 hours away so they can't get there all the time. You can really set up and personalize it. So it's somebody who's kind of like your team wrangler, who's like on making sure that if you can't do something, they're keeping you updated and things like that. It can be very personalized.
Thanks so much to the distinguished panel, Jenny, Michelle, and Alex. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's about you, and it was just mentioned that this is a preparation on an understanding of Alzheimer's disease, better prepare yourself as a caregiver, and we go back to why we were founded from Mr. Brodsky, who in the 80s and 90s really had no place to turn to, no guidance, counseling, and support, and that's why AFA was founded. All the information today can be found on Facebook, and I wanted to tell you we've had over 4,000 people that have been engaged throughout the world on Facebook watching the conference, which is very exciting because we want as many people to see these conferences as possible. I want to thank one of our sponsors, Senior Helpers, AZI. Thanks so much for being here. The boots on the ground, the offices, the local services are here. They're in the back of the room. Get their information, get their business cards. Outside, please drop off your evaluations. It's critically important to us as we move forward with other conferences. Any information you want, you can go on our website, which is alzfdn.org. It's the abbreviation of Alzheimer's Foundation, or call our office, which is the same number as the helpline. It's in your packets. Once again, thank you so much for being here. Very appreciated. Thank you.